Hi students, welcome to your week 12 highlights video. In this video, we're going to talk about Ginny Reddish's Technical Communication and Usability, Intertwined Strands and Mutual Influences. At this point in the semester, a lot of this information is review. You've read other work by Ginny Reddish, and many of your other texts have referred to her. She's very important in the history of the interface between TPC and UX. So let's review via this article some of the concepts that she talks about relative to TPC UX history and TPC UX future. So she reminds us of the different ways the story of the history of UX is told. To some, it is a story emerging from the human factors engineering discipline. To others, it emerges from software development. And to others, still UX relative to the web is tied to information architecture and interaction design. All of these are true stories, right? So where we find ourselves today is at a place where all of these historical threads are braided together. And in fact, technical communicators have been involved in all of these strands emergences. So Reddish wants to remind people of the role of TPC in that rich history and in the present. And I've included a graphic on the screen that is a Venn diagram of interaction design. It's from Qualtrics. You can find it online. It's kind of interesting, and it visually demonstrates what that means and where interaction design exists in terms of an intersection between other kind of approaches or areas of study. So historically, in the field of TPC, usability was related to documents. The question was, how usable were fact sheets, brochures, instructional documentation, etc. So she learned one of her most important lessons by testing a lease, which is an important legal document that sometimes tech writers are involved in creating. And she tested it on the actual population that was using the lease, which in this case was inner city apartment dwellers. So she realized we are not our users, and our users will always surprise us. Interestingly enough, even if you were a tech writer and you happen to live in an urban setting in a quote unquote inner city apartment building, you still might not be your users. She doesn't mean that specifically to that population, but she means that from our vantage as writers and communicators, we can't situate ourselves necessarily in the persona population that we are trying to represent, or we're trying to ease their process through a particular process, through a document. So the users will always surprise us. I think from doing your own usability testing, you'll find the output of the testing surprising. So testing usability at the end, after the lease was already completed and circulated to the people who were using it, was not viable. So what happened as a result? Well, as we know, as we've discussed in previous weeks, participatory design was one of the things that emerged as a result. So I have on the screen this visualization of what participatory design means, where participatory design happens most. So on the right side there, you see co-production. Participants are treated as equals and have an equal say in deciding the project goals and outcomes. So that is the kind of best case scenario for where user participants are involved. That is from uxdesign.cc, so you can find that graphic too if you'd like. So what is the phenomena of minimalism in documentation, and how does the concept of not reading come into play? She mentions this when she's talking about some sort of seminal figures in the history of the TPC UX interface. I think this came from somebody who was working with IBM. I want to attach this, as I do later in this video, to the difference between, or the sameness between, not reading and not writing. Sometimes people find an easier path through a communication when it doesn't require of them a lot of reading. This comes as a result of a technical communicator not doing a lot of writing. So Reddish discusses how many TPC students are experienced with project-based learning, group work with actual clients. I would add that many are also gaining experience in community-engaged TPC. There's a graphic on the screen, a little word cloud, that comes from the Community Engaged Learning Center here at UNM. I've actually worked with this organization before with my undergraduate TPC classes. So doing community engaged learning enhances students' perceptions of themselves and their work, using Reddish's words, as users advocates. So when you're doing your own testing, when you've compiled all of your data and you're writing up your report as if you were presenting it to the organization that created the product that perhaps you're testing, you can think of yourself as the user's advocate. You are the mouthpiece that is representing what their problems were to the organization that actually has some power to change them. So movement of usability over the years is something that Reddish is really interested, obviously, in studying. Now Reddish conceives of it as having moved beyond a product to larger contexts of use. I put the page number there because I think it's worth going back to see what she means about these larger contexts of use. And this relates to her concept of the problem of the little and big. And she gives several examples of what that means. So returning to a concept from earlier of not reading, as I said, how might usability be supported by TPC folks by not writing? So shorter content gets used sometimes when longer content does not. This is an example on the screen from Canva of a very streamlined table of contents that's actually like a visually, graphically powerful reinterpretation of this genre. See what you think of that. So maybe it's not a great example, but it is at least visually meant to represent a new thrust towards a kind of minimalism in design. So moving into web usability, what is the TPC cited UX person's role? How is every website a conversation started by the site visitor? I think that's a really powerful idea. I always like to tell my TPC students when they maybe fret about TPC seeming to be a field in which there's not a lot of creativity. This sometimes comes from creative writing students who find themselves in a TPC class. This phrase of Reddish really helps us reconsider that, because if it is a conversation started with the site visitor, also it opens up an opportunity for new stories to be told between the web interface and the user of that interface. So if it is usable, that facilitates a more positive story being told, a positive relationship emerging, or in fact, a conversation that results in a positive interaction, right? So again, Ginny Reddish, you read another text by her this week. I hope you found some important and lasting takeaways in it. And I'm going to end this video now, and I'll see you in next week's video.